First of all, I guess to kick things off, great to be here with you, and thank you for your time at this session this afternoon. Before I introduce the guests, I just wanted to thank ATM for highlighting the importance of this topic. I'll be your host today. My name is Lorenzo Curci. I'm the co-founder of Earthly, where we help businesses to balance their carbon emissions through nature-based solutions and basically try to help businesses become regenerative. I guess we all appreciate being able to travel, and tourism isn't only about putting smiles on faces and making lasting memories. As one of the largest economic sectors globally, it actually accounts for 10.3% of global GDP, and 1 in 10 jobs on the planet. 1 in 10 jobs, pretty impressive. Of the 1.5 billion international tourist arrivals in 2019, 44% went to cities. With this much economic power, how can we drive this stimulus as a force for good? Well, I guess here to answer that question are my esteemed guests, and I guess I'll kick off with an introduction from you, Glenn.
Yes, my name is Glenn Manzik, not who you see above me right here, and I'm the CEO of the Sustainable Hospitality Alliance.
Thank you.
My name is Kieran Haslam, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Direa, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Good afternoon. My name's Andrew Brown. I'm the Regional Director at the World Travel and Tourism Council. Lorenzo, great to hear you're quoting some of our numbers there, so it's a pleasure to be on stage with these gentlemen.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rami Mkerzel. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Earth Hotels.
Thank you very much. I guess, Andrew, I'll kick off with you. When we spoke earlier, JLL and WTTC had recently launched a tourism readiness index, which addresses what makes a city ready for travel and tourism growth. Can you give us a few insights into that report and that index?
Yeah, sure. But first, just to elaborate on the numbers that you shared before in terms of travel and tourism at a global level. So across 2010 to 2019, travel and tourism outpaced the global economy each and every year. You're right, we were worth 10.3% of global economy. We're bouncing back from COVID. Now we're 1 in 11 jobs. We're 7.7% of the global economy, or 7.6 trillion US dollars. So we're growing. What we saw from COVID is a shift from tier 1 destinations to the great outdoors. And that's where I think this panel is so relevant, because it's how to ensure that the sustainability and regeneration is not just in the cities, which last year saw a big bounce back with a 53% year-on-year growth, but also how to make sure that those tier 2, tier 3 have the right infrastructure, right water, right energy, right Wi-Fi use to make sure that they can attract that tourist. So you referred to the JLL report, and that's taking a look at cities or destinations and having a very holistic approach to infrastructure investment. So we looked at it across all the different broad spectrums. So business and leisure travel, safety and security, how good are the hospitals, how good are the hotels, the airport connectivity, and worked out that they fall into 5 buckets. 5 buckets, whether they're managing momentum or they're really in a place that they need to ensure they don't get overcrowding. So that's what came out of the report, and it's a fluid index. So if we were to apply it to Direa, for example, who's getting itself back into the limelight, it's saying, here are some examples of where you want to be in 5 years' time, and then 10 years' time, and active ways of getting there. So that's what the report is, and look forward to sharing more of that as we go across the session.
Yeah, and I guess, Rami, you're an operator. You're building hotels around the world, and you're building one in Porto at the moment. And I think Portugal has seen an absolute renaissance in recent years. More and more travel, culturally aligned. When it comes to Earth Hotels, how have you tried to use the hotels in terms of sustainability, but also reducing the impact and driving that sort of cultural connection?
So I guess there's 2 parts to that, and our approach is we're a developer and an operator, and so we work very closely with our investor group to identify locations or assets which we could really take on that are underutilized and bring back to life, such as the Porto project. And then we look at communities and cities that have quite a lot of energy and a vibrant story, because we're about storytelling. So we look at how can we regenerate the asset purely from a financial sustainability, eco sustainability, as well as community building. Porto is a 50 key property. It's small for when you think about the grand scheme of master planning, but we're generating directly or indirectly 500 jobs because we're working with local suppliers. We're working with contractors. We're hiring local talent, legal, as well as the design team that we're working with. And from there, we're also sourcing everything within a 50-mile radius. So what we put into the hotels and what we take out of them as well. So that's on the real estate side of it.
Yeah. I mean that's incredible. I think that aspect of looking at sustainability, being part of the community is so important.
Yeah.
And I guess Kieran, you're doing what I guess Earth Hotels are doing at a much larger scale. I mean, when you're creating a city or rejuvenating a city, how do you harness sustainability and regeneration across your project?
So I think you're right. It's many of the same promises and direction of travel that Rami's just discussed. You have to engage the existing community to begin with. In a project like ours, at least, we're not going to a vacant area that's remote. We're in the heart of the capital city of Riyadh. So there is a community that's there, about 100,000 inhabitants of Diriyah as it stands today in our supervisory area. And we have to work sympathetically. Now, the good news is that we've got an open dialogue with them and we understand what their requirements are, just for life as it stands today. And then we're mapping over what we think the future can be, always trying to be, curatorial ambassadors to say what we are today is built on what we were in the past, and who we can be in the future is tenfold this. If we do it in the right way, and I think you said, Lorenzo, a little earlier, force for good. Those are the three greatest words you can imagine, right? Because if every single one of us today said even the seemingly insignificant things, if we were to apply the logic, how can I do this seemingly insignificant material movement as a force for good, what would that be? And so it's looking at that community, it's building 55,000 jobs in Diriyah for Diriyah locals. It's bringing Diriyah locals into our organization. We have 14% of our organization are people from Diriyah. So you've got that outlook that it's here to stay. We're not approaching this like a developer coming into an area, developing, handing over the keys and leaving. We are of that area as well. And so that makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. And then looking at sustainability holistically. So it's not just the trees and the varieties and the 6.5 million shrubs that we've planted. It's also, what do you do with sustaining language? A really great example of sustainability is what they did in Wales years ago by bringing back the Welsh language, and it's the same kind of a concept. How do we bring important terminology, important cultural and traditional aspects of Najd, of Diriyah, how do we bring that to life again so that people can tap into it and then can amplify it?
Yeah, I guess, one of our clients actually just once said that sustainability, which gets banded around a lot, actually means responsibility. And I think, we all need to take that responsibility. And I think, when it comes to Earthly, what we found is that, working with projects that help and work alongside local communities were actually the most likely to succeed. Projects that really brought in the stakeholders to fundamentally understand the value that could be had from working in a regenerative manner. And I guess, Glenn, you're working with the Sustainable Hospitality Alliance. One of the pillars is that people pillar. We look at a lot of values, diversity and inclusion, slavery. Like how do you help your members with these elements, that connection to people and what can be done?
Well, if I can build on what was just said there about tourism is a force for good, or if I can add to that, and what you're hearing is prime examples of that, when properly managed. And I think the issue is in 2018, the Oxford Dictionary Word of the Year was over-tourism. And that was because we were only looking at occupancy rates and heads in beds and GDP numbers as elements of success. And what we need to do is add to the level of success what those measures are. And community, the connection to the community is a key element for our success. We have to have a social license to actually do the work we do, and that can only happen with that engagement with community. And we've taken the position of a net positive hospitality philosophy, which is going beyond net zero and sustainability, but actually being a contributor, not an extractor. And that leads to being inclusive, looking at accessibility needs. It looks at addressing modern slavery and ethical recruitment. And we have a series of guidance materials to help support that, and training materials that help industry watch for that with what's happening in their company and be able to understand that. And then more importantly, I think it's just, you know, I come from Canada. I originally moved from Canada to London to do this job, and we work very closely with the indigenous communities in Canada in order to be successful in tourism. And one of the key words that I heard was, you know, the terminology of Kanukantwa, which is working together both spiritually and mentally for Mother Earth. And that means really connecting with the community, connecting with the land and the animals, people and places and things that don't have voices need to be able to have a voice in the conversation. And that's through the net positive philosophy. We have a detailed pathway to net positive hospitality that enables an industry, no matter where they are in their journey and their starting point, they can be engaged, and they start right off with the WTTC's basics program, and that helps them progress all the way from there.
Amazing. And I guess that takes us nicely sort of to Andrew. You know, we talk about tourism being, you know, a force for good, and there's some great, you know, is there some great examples of where we can actually see, you know, tourism working in synchrony with local government to deliver on a success story?
Yeah, sure. I think it comes where we've all talked about community, but it's involving the public, private, and community together, and ensuring that tourism is on the landscape when we are looking to develop or redevelop, particularly in this case, urban areas. I think Didier Gates doing a great example of that, bringing in, you say 55,000 folks for employment. Was that just Durians, just local? Yes. I mean, that's amazing to do that, to enhance a culture aspect. There are a couple of other examples as well. One took place in Colombia. So where we all know the back history of Colombia, they went in, it's called the Bronx District. So not New York, but in Colombia, where they moved it out, made sure that safety and security was number one, and made sure that it was a place where tourism can thrive. They did that by encouraging those creative arts, creative industries to move in to ensure that they were safe and secure. And that created its own ecosystem where then different theatres popped up, cafes, restaurants, libraries. So now that's a thriving tourist hub, right? And I think that's a really, really good example that we have seen through our different reports, particularly with an urban regeneration, quite a big city example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that working with governments isn't always that easy. And I guess, Kieran, you've worked quite closely, and Rami, you've probably got your own examples of working with governments. You know, what do you think, we need to do as an industry to help, you know, governments and local authorities to deliver on development? Is there things that you've done in Porto or other countries to try to move the dial and the speed at which we can develop?
Look, I think one of the key things is dialogue and taking action, because especially in this part of the world, we talk a lot, we spend a lot of time around round tables, and you end up not really getting anywhere. So we've been fortunate enough where we've gone to government entities here and even in Portugal, and we've presented our case, our business case from a design, real estate, job creation, investment standpoint, and we've said, look, this is what we want to do. We need your help. We need you to help us get the right licenses, and we're not looking to cut corners. We're just looking to get the support to execute. And in this part of the world, as an example, we build our hotels through two concepts, essentially regeneration, which is what we're talking about, and on a greenfield, we build using modular technology. And the municipalities here are still a long way from understanding the benefits and the usage cases of this, because it hasn't been done. So we've been spending almost 18 months now educating the municipalities. Listen, this is what we want to do. These are the sustainable elements, the more impactful components on how it can enhance the real estate development. And we're getting there. Are we there yet? No, but I think it's we've been waiting for government to come to us.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. We need to go. We need to push the envelope a little bit, invest a little bit more time and money into it. So.
Yeah, Andrew, looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the fact that a great city to travel in is one that's a great city to live in. So when you're talking public-private community, if we're living there, we're enjoying it. I live in London, fantastic place to be. Bringing family and friends over to travel there, they love it just as much. So I think that is a huge takeaway from our side. It's making sure that tourism is not at the forefront, but the community is at the forefront so that the folks living there can enjoy the enhancement that tourism brings.
I think just picking up on your question, Lorenzo, I'm very fortunate, as all of my colleagues in Saudi are right now, that the vision of the leadership in Saudi Arabia is hugely ambitious and supported with that outlook of what's hidden in that Vision 2030 statement, which is so beautiful. And if you haven't read it, it's worth rereading, where it clearly identifies that the greatest asset to Saudi Arabia are its people. So now you put the humanity banner up straight away. And if that's your vision, and you recognize that people are so important, and your ambition is so high, and you've got a bank balance that can help you get there as well, well then you can achieve great things. And so we're fortunate not to have that same pressure, and I do feel for that pressure, having worked in different countries around the world where you have to sort of try to prove your worth when you know that the answer is right. We're fortunate in Saudi that really the main driver is to bring it all together cohesively, and I think that doing it with the outlook that you try to do what you can for future generations at all times, but it's hard because you do have to put a line in the sand somewhere. So right now we're investing in technology for quote unquote the smart city concept, the intelligent city that's preempting your requirements and delivering on them in hopefully a more environmentally sound way. But we have to do this now, knowing full well that by the time the full city is running and bustling and it's 2030, some of that technology may be obsolete. So it's really hard work, and you need the support of government as well to understand that.
Sure.
And that's one of the elements.
And I think you also have the complexity of a heritage site, where you're working to try. The planning is not always easy, and how have you tried to bring in? How has tourism been brought into the project, into the master plans? Is that something that you've taken as a main focus, or as sort of something that works alongside the plan?
It's exactly what Andrew said. I mean, he summed it up perfectly. You have to be able to live there, right? Go to some of the great cities around the world. I'll tell you some of my favorite cities: Barcelona, Toronto, my home city of Melbourne. They are livable. You can jump on public transport for free. You can get to where you need to be. There's that ease, that's that livability, and it's natural. The inhabitants of the city, the inhabitants of the location, they take great pride and pleasure in being alive and functioning there, and then the tourism follows. And it's literally that. So, the focus is, what do we do for our community? How do we build our community? Do we have the right mosques in close proximity? Do we have the right schools and education, universities in close proximity? And fundamentally, if you have that at the core of what you do and you think about sustainability, you have to hold yourself to account to some degree on delivering that. So what's the KPI? For us, the KPI is 20 years from today, is there a longer life expectancy for people who reside and live and work in Diriyah? Is their childhood obesity rates lower? Because we know that that's a topic that we want to address. And all of those things are a knock-on effect of having a healthy life, having that balance, getting outdoors, running through a bike track or a walking track in a green palm grove wadi landscape. This is outdoor activity, this is healthy activity. How do we take a 15-minute city? How do we make it a 10-minute city? Because it's a little bit hotter in summer and August in Riyadh than in other parts of the world. So how do we take that 15-minute city idea and make it a 10-minute city? And those are all of the things that we have to do now. Yeah. That's sort of, the direction of travel.
Yeah, it's that, making it livable. And I guess here we're talking at different scales. Rami, you're building a hotel, you're building, revitalizing a city. I guess one of the things that we find, at Earthly is that there's so much complexity when we're looking at all the different challenges that we have when talking about regeneration, sustainability, CO2, net zero, the understanding of how to get there, what it means for people. And I guess there's a lot of confusion for the sustainability, leaders. There's a lot to look at, and I think this is where the SHA probably comes in. How have you helped your members understand the route to net zero, how to get there, and what it means fundamentally for them?
Well, as I mentioned, we have really developed a comprehensive approach to net positive thinking,
yeah.
and net zero is very much part of that, obviously. And it's a detailed pathway of direction, detailed guidance materials to support that, and also we've even developed a simulator to support that, so it enables you to gamify it a little bit to really make it more approachable, because it is a very complex topic.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to really make it very simple and approachable for the operator on the ground to actually make it happen. I always think, my family used to own hotels across Canada, and I would think, would my dad do some of this stuff, in terms of all the reporting requirements we have to do now, all the initiatives that we are more responsible for in the hospitality sector. And I would say, for the most part, a lot of the small SMEs are having a difficult time with that. So we as an industry are working on really building those tools and resources. One of them is, carbon measurement, for example. We have a very comprehensive carbon measurement tool that enables any hotel to be engaged. We're over 80,000 hotels already use that tool around the world, because we have to be able to measure in a common way. If you can't measure it, you basically don't manage it. So we have to really build that measurement into it, provide the training, give the execution to make that happen, and the SHA is, through its partners, are building that up.
And I think that's the perfect example of having, a leadership position, giving you the real basis to which to go with. Governments are not doing enough to sort of help lead the standard. I think the UK GBC and the Green Building Council has still not delivered on their net zero objectives, or what it means to be net zero. So I think taking that leadership position and giving everybody the baseline, the way, the methodology is critical. But what do you find is holding people back? If there is something that's holding people back from taking the leap into carbon reduction, and is there anything that comes out?
I think it can be very mystifying, quite frankly. There's so many things coming at the hotelier right now on different organizations, different philosophies, different measurement companies and quite frankly, regulators are coming at them in the absence of the hotel industry.
Yeah.
And so what the industry has to do is come out and explain what we need, and then actually set the bar. Because if we don't say something, in the absence of that, people will continue and organizations will continue to layer on new requirements without the conversation with the hospitality industry. And we have, I have to say, the industry, and it's great to see Rami here, who's doing amazing work, you could actually look at a lot of the booths around here. They're all wanting to be sustainable. They all want to show that. Within the Hospitality Alliance, everybody's around the table in a pre-competitive conversation. They're not seeing that as a competitive edge. They're seeing it as a pre-competitive. They're sharing resources, ideas, philosophies in order to catalyze change quicker. And that's what we're seeing now. But there's a strong willingness, but I think as more things get thrown at them, it becomes very difficult. So we have to actually make it much more practical and approachable, and that's what we're trying to do collectively.
I guess, Rabi, you've done a lot in this space, but where did you take your learnings? Obviously, the Earth Hotels is a fundamental.
One thing, when we looked at this, and you said there's so much coming at you. From our perspective, we want to build joyful places on Earth, right? So when we look at what we want to do, is we're trying to simplify it. We're trying to also showcase that you could build a sustainable, from a financial standpoint, we're a private company, we want to make money, but you could build places that people want to go and enjoy, and that are cost effectively built, but that are also impactful, that are sustainable. And I think when you start to look at the real estate piece and how it's immersed in the community, and how you try to source locally from from manpower to know-how to produce, and put that all together, it starts to make a lot of sense. So we're not chasing accreditations. We're talking about it earlier. For us, if our consumer gives us a seal of approval, there it is. At least as we get going, and the consumer knows more than you. The consumer is extremely well informed, extremely dialed in, and you can't really paint a picture and have smoke and mirrors. You need to be true to the elements that you're presenting. So for us, regeneration is a big part of how we get into cities. So UNESCO heritage cities like Porto, we're looking to take assets, bring them back to life. In terms of other cities in Europe, that's easier. In this part of the world, if this is where we come from. If you told me 10 years ago launching Earth Hotels, was gonna get the attention of the government entities that we're talking to, there's no chance. I think the mindset has shifted. Yeah. We are going back to our roots in this part of the world. We're proud to have a Dir'iyya or have the different destinations like Jazirat al-Hamra in Iraq and in Abu Dhabi, everything that's going on. And before we were going out to build the shiny, big, impressive, state-of-the-art projects with imported know-how, right? Today we want to export our culture, our stories, which I think is a big part, and kudos to the governments. So I go back to being critical of the governments. I have to say they're really extending their hand on that standpoint. And in Saudi, we're a private company. We're getting so much support. We have 2 projects in Saudi in the private sector. We're getting a lot of support because of the sustainable measures that we're trying to bring into the mix. So that's.
And I guess I having been here this week, I do sense that there's a lot of good practice here in Saudi, which is not maybe happening elsewhere. And I don't know, Andrew, what could other governments do to be more conducive to the tourism industry? I mean, we see here being almost like a perfect case. What could other governments do to be conducive towards tourism and regeneration?
It's really around sharing best practices. So those that are doing great stuff, shout from the rafters, because you need to share that with. Ultimately, the reason we travel cities, you said Barcelona, Toronto, I think Melbourne, is to have part of that culture and that ingenuity that they have there. That's why we travel. So the whole idea of urban regeneration is to keep that flavor of that part of the destination. I think in terms of your question, we have put out a lot of research on this around tourism overcrowding. You mentioned that earlier, Glenn, around what are the principles to manage momentum and to balance those dynamics to ensure that places are still good to live in, but great to travel to. And there's a whole raft of information there. I'm not going to call it any specific government that's doing great stuff, but I think what Karen and Diri are trying to do, and all there in Saudi, is to enhance what people haven't seen before, to showcase the livelihoods that is there in the kingdom, to make sure that people can enjoy that and open up that world. And that's really interesting to watch from afar and to see what's happening there, because having been at Diri Gate last year, it's really exciting. I look forward to seeing in a couple of years' time what comes out even further.
If I may lob a hand grenade in, do we need to ask the government question? I mean, if you've got enterprising individuals who have got a conscience and are trying to do something groundbreaking like Rami and his team, no matter what the scale, even really, really small projects can have a huge effect. And I just remind everyone, one of the greatest, most highly regarded sushi chefs in the world, sushi restaurants in the world, seats 10 people at a bar counter in a subway station in Tokyo. That's scale, tiny scale, with a massive impact on gastronomy the world over. The same way that your project in Porto can have a huge ramifications on how people see things as being potentially, commercially, viable or spiritually enlightening. These are all of the things that we can do, even on a really, really small, little scale.
If I can add one last thing to that, and there's no doubt about the customer. But I would say the employee of the future is also expecting more from their employers.
100%.
You know, the great job and experience, and tourism's always been known you could actually grow within it and really be that owner or the general manager one day and you start right at the bottom. You can do that in the tourism industry, but they're looking for an industry now with purpose. And we've lost 20% of the workforce since the pandemic who will never come back. And that will require, you know, us really tapping into the workforce of the future. And the sustainability message will be one key message for our ability to attract labor back to the industry, which is one of our greatest challenges globally right now.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that connection is something that we tap into at Earthly. I think there's more and more people want to travel sustainably, more and more people want to have a positive impact in the choices that they make. But sometimes, again, the message is confused, the impact is lost. And so it's about making that really simple, trying to demonstrate and showcase and keep track of the impact, which is particularly important. And I think, you know, we have to look at also the cultural differences. People don't all see things the same way, and they have different things that they might appreciate more than other people, whether that's welfare or animal life. So it's allowing that opportunity to have choice in it as well, not just this top-down approach. But I think what I hear is like really excites me is this idea that, you know, we're really trying to rebuild and connect at a cultural level. Where before, like Rami, you said, it was about building towers of glass and copycat for technologies or other cultures. I think this idea of tapping into the choices and the culture of those locations to educate is also why we travel. It's one of the most interesting and important things about learning to cohabitate on this planet. And so I think tapping into that is really interesting. And I don't know if you've seen this as a shift as well with the SHA or...
Yeah, it is all about storytelling.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in the storytelling business, and we are seeing what we've done a very poor job, quite frankly, as an industry, is telling the story of our sustainability effort collectively. And that's a big job, the SHA, and together with WTTC and all our other partners around the world, we need to do a much better job collectively, cutting through the noise and telling that story. But we do have a lot of work to do in order to achieve that.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, one of the things that often gets left behind is, you know, when I speak to a lot of businesses, it's sort of, you know, we talk about carbon, but then, you know, there's biodiversity and water scarcity. And I actually know that both Glenn and Andrew, you've released some topics on water, but maybe, do you want to talk a little bit on your water topic?
Sure. You want to go first, Andrew? Or?
I'll go first,
You go
and then you double down. Okay, so at the Global Summit last year, which was in Riyadh, we launched some data that highlighted how much the carbon footprint is in travel and tourism. Now that encompassed GHG emissions, water use, energy use, also the employment breakdown. And we launched a couple of weeks back what that water number was. And it's less than 1%. It's actually 0.6% of all water use. That's from travel and tourism. So it's not that high, but we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that we can use grey water for different things and examples. So that's my stat. What have you got, Glenn?
Well, one of the things we did was a destination water risk index. So we analyzed 370 destinations globally and understood where the high risk destinations are, where the water scarcity is becoming a problem. And we did that because we wanted to inform the industry when they're making those decisions about reconstructing a property in that particular jurisdiction to really take some water scarcity strategies into play. And, you know, it was interesting, while, you know, 90% of the highest destinations of concern, quite frankly, are from this area and Southeast Asia. One of the things that it was interesting, even places like Dublin was on that list. And you would think, wow, Dublin, how is that possible? Well, it was the infrastructure under the ground that was problematic, that was causing an issue. And as we as an industry need to be more cognizant of those things, again, it's about giving back to the community and being engaged with the community, respecting the community, and one of those areas is around water.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, Kieran, you're building in an area that doesn't have much water. And it's quite scary. I think a few years ago, South Africa almost ran out of water, and they had to make some huge changes to infrastructure. How are you looking at this? Because this will be an important topic into the future, right?
It's proper, thorough life cycle analysis. That's the first place to start. Who's done it? who's done a life cycle analysis for a city? No one's done it. So, and it's really, really complex because seemingly incidental things can have a huge effect. You know, water scarcity in the hotel industry, stop serving avocados on the menu for breakfast, all right? That's going to have an impact. Just think about that. It's going to have an impact if you don't eat avocados and we'll serve it in your hotel. So it's all of that, and looking cohesively at that from a life cycle analysis perspective, you might find that it's not exactly fit for purpose today, but it might be further down the track as a consequence. And so the greenification is, and we've talked about this before, the greenification in Saudi Arabia is undoubtedly going to take a bite out of resources. However, what that perpetuates later is the opportunity for less water to be utilized and a higher moisture content in soil. So we've got to make some movements in the right direction, and it's sort of similar to what I said before. We've got to do things now with the best intentions and with the best possible outlook we can have. Is it going to absolutely tick all of the boxes and be fully, perfect? No, but we're doing it for the right reasons, and that's hugely important.
Yeah, and I think it becomes so key to bring all of these elements together. And I guess looking back at the title, you say looking beyond conservation, and I think the feeling I get is that there is a huge opportunity to look at tourism, the financial implications of it, to use that for a force for good. And I think sometimes it's the mind shift, it's the demystifying that helps to clear up, the different avenues that we can take. But I guess, our consumers want to be on this journey as well. And, I don't know, Rami, you probably speak to the consumer much more. What do you hear from them about what excites them, what they want?
You guys said something about it's not the consumer for us is everybody around us, full circle, including the citizens, our staff. And I think the most important thing for them is purpose, and is being connected to the place that they're visiting or that they live in. So our urban destinations like Porto, like Jeddah, the main focus is who lives there, what do they want to do, what do they do, what interests them, what is the community around them, and try to connect essentially the dots to. You talk about that 10-seater in Tokyo, the oldest fish shop in Jeddah, in the old Balad area, where, how can we connect to them and do something together with them? And I think meaningful visits, being able to create a space where people can work, play, socialize, and a place that has a little bit of a purpose. I go back to that. So, and it's not. Honestly, it's not rocket science. I think it's just trying to strip back so much of the noise and try to focus on, okay, who's our customer? How do I talk to them? How do I give them what they need? And we're on a certain scale. Diriyah's on another scale, and it's different if you're in Jeddah or Ras Al Khaimah or Porto. But the underlining thread is they all want the same thing at the end of the day, generally. The world is a much smaller place than it used to be.
Yeah, and I guess we're all awakening to the perils that we're in. And I think this is a huge opportunity for the sector, for governments, for all of us to sort of move together in a positive manner. And I love the way that we could do that also in a culturally appropriate way, which I think is really powerful. So I did want to open up a few questions to the panel, to the floor, if there was any. Any questions? No? Okay. Well, any final remarks? I mean, what does the SHA have up the cards for the future?
Well, we're about to launch a new strategy for the Alliance. It's a very bold approach. We want to take some very proactive action, and I think, it's interesting to hear the hoteliers around the table, the companies, they're ready to take action now. It was voluntary before. It's now really understood that this needs to happen now. If not now, when will we do it? So this is the time, and we're running out of time.
Yeah.
I think that's the big message that we have in front of us, and we're we're working hard to achieve some bold action.
Super. And Kieran, I guess we're all excited to actually know when the city, when obviously what's going on.
Well, I think firstly, as all partners in this industry together, I think we can all agree that the world's moved very, very quickly from, bumping into someone who's just come back from vacation and saying, oh, what was your journey like, to being, what was your journey like? And that's sort of really key, that individual, that unique experience, making it really meaningful. No matter how much or how little you do, as long as it's meaningful, it's going to have far-reaching ramifications. And for what we're doing at the moment with Drea, we're trying to really, set that in motion. So the first of the iconic and the landmark elements of our master plan are extremely meaningful ones to us, starting with the UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is fully open globally to any visitor, domestic or international. The Bujeri Terrace with the fine dining, but also the next few that come along is that we've got a hotel opening which is going to hit at the end of this year, start of next year, and it's really going to be anchored on tradition and culture and celebrating the meaning of why are you here in Drea, to get that origin story of what it means to be Saudi in the first place, right? So that's really exciting for us, because this year you're going to see a few more of these assets open across our master plan.
And Andrew, for you?
Yes, certainly. So just to go back to where you started with the economic numbers, and that's not the be-all and end-all, but by the end of this year, if our forecasts are correct, travel and tourism is going to be at 95% of its 2019 levels. So almost back to parity pre-pandemic. Forecast that forward to 2032, it's going to be worth 15.5 trillion US dollars. Right now, 7.7. So to ensure that we can have that success, have that growth in travel and tourism around the world, to ensure that we can have the urban regeneration, we need holistic investment, a holistic approach to investment, to ensure that Rami can put up his hotels and make the most use and have the greatest social impact. So that's a main takeaway message from our side, is the holistic approach to everything related to tourism and society in general.
Yeah, and Rami, I guess for you, does that make sense? Are you going to drive that change?
So look, I think we go back to the customer, and there was a study done by Skift, for those who know Skift, and even Booking.com, and the latter was they interviewed 30,000 clients, users, and one of the questions was, is sustainability on top, an important factor in your travel? Resounding yes, over 60%. And then the other piece is, it's, do we have enough experiential product on offer for you to book? And 78% said no. So I think there's a massive gap in terms of creating these meaningful destinations, these purposeful programs, and from our standpoint, creating experiential hotels in our little way. We want to do our piece as much as we can, and then hopefully, inflict a little bit of change in the market.
Super. Well, thank you very much for all of you for sharing all your thoughts and ideas. And I think, hopefully the next few years we will be able to use, the power of regeneration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.